You woke up tired. Again, a list was already waiting for you. Emails, errands, a dozen small fires to put out before lunch. You will move all day and still feel like you are falling behind. So you assume this is simply what being human feels like. Constant motion, endless tasks, a body built for the grind. But the real answer is far stranger. The people whose bodies you inherited lived for hundreds of thousands of years before farming, before clocks, before anyone had a boss. And they may have worked less than you do, far less. They may have been better rested, better fed, and less anxious than the person reading this sentence. What did ancient humans actually do all day? The honest answer will not sound like history. It will sound like a vacation you cannot afford. Start with a man named Richard Lee. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Borshay Lee went to live with the Jew/Hwansi people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. These were foragers. They planted nothing. They stored almost nothing. They lived more or less the way every human on Earth lived before agriculture. Lee did something simple. He counted. He followed people and recorded how many hours they actually spent finding food. The number was small, around 2 to 3 hours a day, roughly 15 to 17 hours across an entire week. The rest of the time, and there was a great deal of it, went to rest, visiting, talking, sleeping, playing, and making things by hand. Sit with that for a moment. A full week of work for you might be 40 hours, or 50, or more. For them, the work of staying alive was finished before you would have cleared your inbox on a Tuesday. And they were not scraping by. Lee weighed their food and studied their diet and found it richer than anyone had expected. The Jew/Hwansi leaned heavily on the mongongo nut, a hard little protein-packed kernel scattered so thickly across the desert that one elder asked why his people had never taken up farming, reportedly answered with a question of his own. "Why should we plant," he said, "when there are so many mongongo nuts in the world?" An anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins took numbers like Lee's and gave them a name that made other scholars uncomfortable. He called these foragers the original Affluent society. Affluent, wealthy, not because they owned much, they owned almost nothing, but because they wanted little and got it easily. Wealth, Sahlins argued, is not how much you have. It is the gap between what you want and what you can get. For a hunter-gatherer, that gap was small. For you, it may be the size of your whole life. More recently, an anthropologist named James Suzman lived with these same people across many years and watched the old way finally die as fences and farms and paid work closed in around them. He argues something unsettling. The foraging life, which lasted longer than everything we call history combined, was not a grim struggle we were lucky to escape. In many ways, it was the most stable and balanced way of living our species has ever found. But you should be careful here. It is easy to turn this into a fairy tale, so let me complicate it. Decades after Lee, an anthropologist named Frank Marlowe spent years among the Hadza, foragers in the dry savanna of northern Tanzania. The Hadza are one of the last peoples on Earth still living largely by hunting and gathering. And what Marlowe found was more demanding than any paradise. The work was real. Women walked miles and dug hard tubers out of stony ground with sharpened sticks. Men tracked wounded animals for hours under a brutal sun, and many days they came home with nothing at all. Hunger was not a stranger. The easy hours were real, but so were the hard ones. Then a researcher named Herman Pontzer measured something nobody had measured before. He tracked how many calories the Hadza actually burned in a day. He expected an enormous number. These people move almost constantly. He was wrong. The Hadza burned roughly the same number of calories each day as an office worker in Chicago or London. How is that possible? Pontzer's answer changed how scientists think about the human body. Your body runs on a budget. When you spend more energy moving, it quietly spends less elsewhere. On inflammation, on stress, on 100 hidden processes you will never notice. Effort does not simply pile up the way a fitness tracker promises. The body adapts. It balances its own books. So the ancient day was not lazy. It was active without being frantic, demanding without being endless. There is a difference between those two things, and you have probably forgotten what it feels like. So what filled all the other hours? This is the part that should stay with you. They talked. Constantly. Researchers who have lived among foragers describe conversation as the beating heart of human life. Gossip, argument, jokes, planning, teaching, complaint. And when the sun went down, the talk chang.